So anyway, guys, the Hazardous Substances Act. I'm not going to spend too much of time here because I think a lot of you have been attending our stewardship and compliance forums, are well in the know in terms of what's going on here. Okay, so basically the three key things here is what's a Group 1 Category A hazardous substance according to Act 15 of 1973, which is the Hazardous Substances Act. What's a Group 1 Category B hazardous substance according to the Act? What's the double locking thing all about? And what's a poison register all about? Okay, these are the questions that we've been receiving in droves coming into our emails and also through phone calls. Why? Because a lot of the environmental health inspectors are currently doing inspections at facilities. Okay, so people are now jumping up and about with this one. So in a nutshell, who requires a Section 4 Group 1 Category A license? Okay, so this is very simple. These are companies or branches which import, trade, sell or use technical grade aluminium phosphide, antimony potassium, sodium tartrate, or zinc phosphide. And now Act 15 does provide a list of Group 1 Category A hazardous substances, but the substances that I've listed on this slide are the substances that are relevant to the pesticide industry. Okay? And this a Group 1 Category A license is applicable only to the manufacturers and formulators. And the Act also makes it clear that technical grade aluminium phosphide sold on its own, okay, is not registered under Act 36. All right, so it's not part of a formulated product. It's sold on its own with its own packaging and its own labeling, going to the formulator for his use or for him to trade or for him to sell on. Okay, so that's what we're talking about in terms of a Group 1 Category A license. So those products, well, those hazardous substances not registered under Act 36 of 1947. Whereas your Group 1Bs, these are registered under Act 36 of 1947. And this is where the confusion is currently coming in. So let's just take a trip down memory lane. What did we do before? Okay, and what does the Act state? All right, the Act states that your hazardous substance Group 1 Category B needs to have a 6.1 toxic class. More importantly, needs to be Group 1, okay? That's what we knew. And previously with the color bands, this was easy. This was generally related to your red labels, which depicted the WHO Group 1 in terms of acute toxicity. But the Act also specified that you have a skull and crossbone with the words giftig, poison, or toxic as well on that label. So it was very easy before when we had the color bands in understanding what a Group 1 Category B product was. Generally your red labels that needed to be locked up. Okay, and this was also specified in Annexure B, which is the evaluation tool used by inspectors when they visit your facility. Okay, so that's very straightforward there. But now with the GHS, we know the GHS is not entirely the same thing as what the WHO system was. Okay, the GHS doesn't only take into account the active ingredient, it takes into account all ingredients in the formulation. Okay, so this is now where we as a stewardship portfolio see a big problem coming. Because a product, for example, you might have a glyphosate product, okay, and I've seen some labels on Agri-Intel. A glyphosate product with a skull and crossbone on it. It wasn't flagged because of glyphosate, it was flagged because of a co-formulant. Okay, but that's not what Act 15 is currently saying. Act 15 works on the technical tox data for the active ingredient in terms of oral and dermal toxicity only. Doesn't take into account co-formulants at this stage. So then if an inspector now goes and says, lock up all that glyphosate, and if you don't know what the regulation is saying, how are you going to find space to lock up a product that you're basically storing at high volumes? Not an easy thing. Also, is the skull and crossbone that's depicted on this red label the same thing as the skull and crossbone that we're seeing with the GHS pictogram? Because in the Act, it specifies how that skull and crossbone is to be depicted on your label. Is it the same thing? And some members can argue that it's not the same thing and legally it should not be binding. We can go further. Annexure B of the license application form, it still talks about a skull and crossbone and the words toxic and giftig. On a GHS label, you don't have those words. You either have a warning or a danger now going forward. So does everyone see the utter mess that we're currently sitting with in terms of this act. Okay, but the highs and lows of this is that going forward, we're going to need a list because we can no longer rely on labels per se and identifying straight through labels for the reasons I've just provided to all of you now. But in terms of this list, do we have a list? And during the Stewardship Forum, the most recent one that I hope many of you here did attend, there was a health inspector from the GP province who noted that they're working off a list. Now, this was news to myself, Gerard, and Quaid, because we've never seen what this list looks like. And they said it's attached to SANS 10228, appendices E and F. So we've got the latest version of the SANS code, but again, there we don't see these appendices. So where is it? So this is what I did. I emailed the NDOH, noting these issues to them. They came back to me saying that the list, Appendix E and F, is specified in SANS 10228, and that must be used for the purposes of determining a Group 1 Category B substance, or an active ingredient in this case. Okay, but when you get onto the SAB's website, you've got the 7th edition available. You don't have the 2012 edition 6 available. So then that was my response to the NDOH, and then they subsequently sent me these appendixes. Okay, and basically, I'm not even going to talk to you about Appendix F, because that to me is absolutely redundant. But in terms of Appendix E, everyone, this is where it gets interesting, because you've got to use Appendix E, which lists every single pesticide active ingredient within South Africa during that period of 2012. And importantly, it lists the LD50 value, the technical tox data for that active ingredient. Now, the highs and lows here is that if you have an active ingredient, if your product that you are selling has an active ingredient that's listed on this appendix that falls within a WHO Group 1, it is considered a Category B hazardous substance, a Group 1 Category B hazardous substance according to Act 15 of 1973. And the DOH made it clear that that status quo is retained, even with the GHS, because then you got to go look at Section 11 of your STSs, which lists your toxicology information there. And while you have the product toxicology data, you also have it for your components. And that's where you got to refer to the active ingredient. But then again, you don't even need to go look at your STS, because the NDOH has listed the LD50 values for each active ingredient that you must refer to and use. Okay, so basically the highs and lows. You have a product that contains an active ingredient that's listed on Annex E or Appendix E of SANS 10228 2012 edition 6. And if it falls within the WHO Group 1 range, that product, regardless of the formulation or the amount of that active ingredient in it, is considered a Group 1 Category B according to Act number 15 of 1973 in its current form, because it makes no recommendations or no advisories about formulation types or the percentage of a particular active ingredient in the formulation. So you've got to read it as straight is. Now, what we've done for all of you as our members, we've taken this appendix, which is a massive appendix, as I said, listing all active ingredients present in South Africa that were present during 2012. So we've taken this appendix and we've streamlined it down to say to all of you what are Group 1 Category B active ingredients in terms of what the Act is saying. And if you look at our list and you find that that active ingredient is on that list, then you simply say, if one of my product contains this active ingredient, I take it as being a Group 1 Category B. I need to keep it behind lock and key, need to maintain a poison register, and I need to have a license to sell this product. Okay, that's basically the highs and lows of what we're saying. But with that said, we are also communicating with the NDO8. So while we have this list, we have not circulated it as yet because we want to put this forward to the NDOH as well to see what their thoughts are. And we're going to tell them that we are circulating this list to our members. If you're in agreement with it, then we have some alignment on the ground going forward, where errant inspectors cannot come to your depot and tell you take everything off with the danger and lock it up, or take something off with the CMR, the hazard pictogram, and lock it up. It maintains consistency for you on the ground, and it protects your businesses as well against errant inspectors. So once finalized, we will be circulating that list to all of you as our members. Okay, that is something we have done, and we know many of you have wanted this, and we have listened, and it will be coming your way. So watch the space for that. Okay, and then this is more or less what the list looks like in its current form. As I mentioned, all the active ingredients we've listed. We've given you an English name. We've also given you an Afrikaans as well, okay? So we're taking that seriously as well, because we do know on the ground some people, these English names are very difficult, so they may understand it better in Afrikaans. So that's basically how our list is currently looking, but again, it's still going through the process, through the checks. Only once we are 100% happy and we know we can defend it, that's when we will circulate it to all our members, and we're hoping that happens by the 16th of September going forward. So just in terms of your behind lock and key, this is straightforward. Everyone knows that Group 1, Category B, hazardous substances need to be kept behind lock and key, where a separate facility is not required from the main facility. If you have a room there, a lockable room, that's where you can store those products. Or you could erect a drywall around that area in your storage facility with a lockable door. So you can't think out the box like that. Alternatively, what about erecting a lockable mesh cage around the area where you're storing your Group 1 Category B products? Because that's the same thing as having it kept under lock and key. And then what some members also do, they have their facility bonded as Group 1 Category B, where you have a ring bell function that signals to an employee inside to open the door for you to enter, and once you enter, that door is locked, where only they can open that door and let you out once you're done. Okay, so that's the highs and lows of thinking about the behind and lock and key requirement. Okay, it's not as bad as everyone thinks it is. Okay, and then in terms of a poison register, everybody here would know by now what's required and what you need to record, or you could simply take a picture of the slide, because I'm not going to go through every single detail here. But what's important for me is Section 4 license number. So if you're a supplier selling to a distributor, or if you're a distributor selling to an agent, you need to have their Section 4 license number on that invoice. Okay, that's what it's saying. And this is where it becomes important. As Gerard spoke about this morning, something like dichlorophos, it's ending up at the taxi rank in the wrong hands. Something goes wrong that results in a big media outcry. They will pull out, the state will pull out their big boys. And trust me, they've got some very sharp people within their ranks. And those guys will come at you like you've never seen before. And if you don't have a license, or if a supplier has sold to a distributor who's not licensed to be selling those products, and that distributor has sold it to an agent who's not licensed to sell that product, then that also in itself becomes criminal, okay? Because then you've broken the law at all levels, okay? So that's why this becomes so important. So that's the one thing I want to highlight on this slide for all of you going forward. Okay, and then finally, guys, where to from here? We know that the revised regulations are coming, but as to when, who knows? That still remains up in the air. We know that acute toxicity won't change in terms of what the regulations are currently saying in terms of the active ingredients, but will it take into account coformulants as well? We don't know at this stage, okay? Will it take into account Rotterdam Convention Annex 3 chemicals as well? We don't know at this stage, and this is where we're hoping to get some clarity from the NDOH during our meeting on the 13th of September, which they have granted to us, because they also agree that there is currently a big issue on the ground regarding this act as we currently see it. Okay, and then finally, in terms of license issuing and renewal delays, we all know about this. We know that the state is struggling with capacity, but the messaging has been clear that as long as you've submitted your application form, you keep a record, you keep an email trail that effort has been made to continuously follow up on delays, they will not penalize you. You will be able to continue doing business provided you can produce that paper trail upon inspection. Okay? Currently, there's not much anybody can do here unless the state gives more funding to the EHS directorate. There's really not much we can do. But currently, as I mentioned, the Act looks at the technical tox data for the active ingredient in the product. By saying that, it means that the Act in its current form is legally binding, where the status quo is retained. Okay, that's very important as well. Don't think because it's old, it's not legally binding. It is still legally binding. Similar to what I said with Annex A of SANS 10234 when I covered the EIA regulations. But what we do know, that going forward, a list will be crucial, okay, especially if they're going to take into account more parameters. And this is where we need clarity from the DOH, but not just that, also offer them our assistance. Not because we want to butter up to the DOH, no, but because we want stability on the ground, where they get their boxes ticked, we get our boxes ticked. Ultimately, the objective for the NDOH and for ourselves is to maintain stability on the ground and consistency in terms of how this act is implemented. And that's what we're going to strive for with the NDOH going forward in terms of the revised regulations. So for now, our advice to keep all red labels locked up, regardless of whether they come with the GHS label. As you all can see, it has been on point to date. Simple advice, but well on point. Because I guarantee you an inspector will not be able to tell you anything different, okay? But with that said, we also understand that there is now a need for a list. There is a need to get more technical from our side to protect against any errant inspectors on the ground, okay? And this is what we've done. We've compiled a list, and once ready for circulation, we will circulate that. So from the beginning of this year, we've been communicating what we're going to do in terms of this act. And I think today, all of you here can see the progress that's being made. Although it's slow, this is now to the benefit of our members going forward, because what we now have is a list that we did not have before. We have communication with the NDOH, but also provincial DOHs, which we did not have before. So slowly but surely, we are taking control of the situation on the ground by working with the DOH in terms of common objectives. And then finally, what have we done? Resources available. We have a quick guideline, which I drew up. It's a nice summary of Gerard's very in-depth webinar on this act. We also have a nice question and answer approach, which Alriza published in the crop circular just recently, which all of you would have received. And that basically answers questions like, if I'm a supplier or if I'm a distributor, can I sell to an agent who doesn't have a license for a Group 1B active ingredient? Okay, can I sell to him? No, you can't. Unfortunately, you can't do that. So you can't sell to anyone who doesn't have a license to trade in those products. Okay, that's the highs and lows of it there. But I think going forward, as we said, our commitment remains to you, all of you here as our valued members. We will continue to put pressure on the NDOH to get clear answers, and we will not stop in our efforts until we have stability on the ground. We are not oblivious to the current situation, but with that said, and as all of you can see, it remains our primary goal to ensure that our members are protected on the ground to their benefit. That's our goal going forward. And again, to reiterate, any help that's needed, please take advantage of the excellent staff we find in CropLife South Africa, and in particular, for any of these acts that I've covered today, the Stewardship Portfolio team stands ready to assist any of our members going forward. And with that said, that brings a close to my session. I hope you guys enjoyed it, learned something, but as I mentioned, feel free to call me, contact me, or query anything at any time. Thank you, Rod.